What I am going to talk about is another PowerShell module I made. It's really nothing that I did. I'm actually taking advantage of something called Polly, and Polly is a .NET library. You saw how those are made now. And Polly is pretty popular, 10,000 stars on GitHub. And the idea with Polly is that it has a whole bunch of resiliency functionality. So things like retry, circuit breaker, which I'll talk about what that is, timeouts, bulkhead isolation, fallbacks, caching, that kind of thing. So a lot of this stuff actually didn't work very well in PowerShell when I was playing with it, but I did expose a bunch of functionality from Polly as the PSPolly module. So this is up on the PowerShell gallery, and it does a lot of the similar things as what you would see in the .NET version of Polly. I'm just using the .NET version of Polly, that DLL, and kind of wrapped it in some commandlets. So this is actually a binary module. So if you actually come and look at this source code, you're going to see some stuff that was very similar to what you just saw. I'm just creating wrappers around the Polly policies and exposing them as PowerShell commandlets. So I'm just going to go through a couple quick demos of what this can do. Kind of the first example is retries. So I have done this a lot in my own code, you have a try catch, and then you have a little counter to see how many times you've tried it, and you put a start sleep in your catch to see, is my website up? I don't know. But in this example, all I'm doing is I'm going to write out to the host so that we can see it executing the script block. That's pretty much what I'm doing through all my demos. And then I'm actually throwing to cause this to fail. So that's going to cause the retry to kick in. So I'm actually going to be running this in here just because it's kind of weird when I kind of resize the terminal over and over again. Oops. I got rid of my prompt because it was slow. All right. So I'm going to take this policy, and what this is going to do is it's going to create a new Polly policy. We want to do a retry, and I want to retry up to 10 times. So if it succeeds, it's going to jump out early. If it keeps failing, it's going to keep retrying until it hits that 10 times. So you create that policy, and then you pass it into invoke Polly command, which takes the policy and a script block. So the script block can contain whatever you want. So if I put that into my Windows terminal, you're going to see that it retried over and over again until it finally threw. So before it hits the actual retry limit, it's going to keep trying and it won't throw the exception. Once it fails after 10 retries, it's going to throw the original exception that came out of your script block. So there are a bunch of customizations you can make to your retries. A lot of times this is what I would do, especially when kind of dealing with external systems that might not be up yet, or changes that take a couple seconds. You can actually put in a retry wait. So the first time this runs, it retries, it's going to wait 3 seconds, then 6 seconds, then 9 seconds, and I'm going to change all this so they don't have to wait that long. Yeah. Oh, okay, that's fine. All right, yeah, so I'll run this example, and then I'll jump to a different type of functionality. 2 minutes, I got it. So yeah, you can see now it's waiting. And then it's going to throw it. All right, now, let's see. Circuit breaker, this one's a little weird, that's why I want to talk about it. So what a circuit breaker does, it's a little different than a retry. It's going to keep retrying and failing, but it's actually going to be throwing the exception. So rather than catching the exception and retrying, it actually throws the exception. But once it hits the third exception, it's going to stop running the code. It's just going to say the circuit breaker is broken, you can't execute this code anymore. So it's kind of a way to suppress the executions. So it might limit you from hitting an external service. Okay, that service isn't up, quit retrying. So you can see it threw those exceptions, but once it hit that fourth exception, now the circuit breaker itself is throwing an exception and it's not executing the PowerShell script. It has caching functionality. So this is another policy, absolute cache. It's going to cache it for 1 hour. You just put whatever you want in the script block. You do need to specify a key so it knows what you're trying to cache. So the first time I run this, it's actually going to take a long time because there's a start sleep in there. So it's going to sleep for 10 seconds. And once I run this again, you'll see that it doesn't sleep. And I'm just going to, yep, so there. And that time it was instant because it got it from the cache. All right, and finally, you can combine your poly policies. So I have a circuit breaker with a retry, and this is a little weird and probably hard to explain in 1 minute, but the circuit breaker will continue to throw exceptions, and then the retry will suppress those exceptions and like re-cause the circuit breaker to start going. So like there's ways you can like combine these policies to make them more intelligent. They have some better examples on the poly website itself. And what you're going to see here is, I have the circuit breaker set to like 3 exceptions, and then I'm retrying 4 times over that circuit breaker, so you'll see 12 tries because it retried the circuit breaker, and then eventually it's going to throw the exception out of the retry handler. So yeah, that's PSPolly.